Welcome back, team, on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. I just went for a morning walk and thought we'd talk a little bit about reciprocation in an organizational environment. Really, it could be a cultural environment too, right? But we're going to talk about reciprocation. You know, the whole idea that um, in an organization we want balance, we want fairness, right? And you can use the term reciprocation, right? Hey, you do work, you get paid. You contribute, there's a return, and so on. And then this energy exchange, this is what makes the world turn, whether it's money or not. Maybe it's you're just helping a neighbor out, whatever it is, It could be giving services, volunteerism, all these things, right? When you do those works, then you see change, you see transformation, not only in organizations, but in the culture at large. This is fairly obvious, right? But one of the things that you noticed, and especially this kind of bubbled up after the pandemic, the thick of the pandemic was because so many people were either laid off or had to work from home and a variation of things in between and, and so on, that that people did a little more self-reflection. And I think because it did drum up fears and concerns, right? Naturally, of course it did. We all were concerned for, people in our family who had, illnesses and who were, particularly susceptible to risk and so forth. Naturally, we're human beings. If you didn't feel that, I'd wonder about you. Even if it was just fear in the level of concern, really, right? But what it also did was, a deeper way, it caused a lot of folks to deep dive into, what you heard potentially is their shadow, really, which really essentially is into your subconscious underlying issues, if you've got any. If you have trust issues, if you have, if there's things around betrayal, if there's issues around, codependence on drugs and alcohol, if there are issues around all kinds of things, right? From the emotional and the psychological to spiritual, you name it. It forced a lot of folks kind of innately by the nature of being, say, staying at home, right? Even people having that had lives of a little bit of balance of going to work, coming home, spending time with the family. The balance was spread out. Now you're immersed, you're in full immersion with your family in some cases. And for some folks, that forced reflection because let's face it, if people have codependencies that are based on traumas, generational trauma, that's going to bubble up. And if you can't escape it, if your work or going away to work was a coping mechanism as much as your profession, you can see how these dynamics created probably a back and forth, a bit of a ping-ponging probably sensation within a human being, depending on the issue that we're talking about. So when you look at that, one of the things that you kind of notice is there is a bit of projection onto organizations that, well, you're the reason why why I'm not happy, why I don't have fulfillment in my life. And in instances, that can be true, right? The organization as a whole could be completely unfair, completely detached from outcome or concern about your role and who you are as a human being working in that organization. So, with those things in mind, people have to figure it out. But we can't project onto that organizational culture is somehow much worse than it had ever been when the pandemic hit. In fact, organizational cultures always struggled. And if you think about a $25 trillion about GDP in the United States, a third of that is waste. A third of that is, broken up into inefficiency, ineffectiveness, actual waste, wasted materials and resources, which is sad, and other subtle forms of waste. uh, that have basically emanated out from our inefficiencies and ineffectiveness. So, there has always been a level of organizational culture, and we can see in the crucible of organizations, because that's where we track the data. We probably track the data better in organizations than we do in our culture at large. And I think that's where there's a cognitive dissonance. We look at organizations and say, "Oh my gosh, they're all the all these owners are so terrible. They're so terrible." Meanwhile, look in the communities that you live in. You know, uh, look at people who are corrupt. Dive into the corruption. At least your organizations have standards that they're supposed to be following, and that there's an accountability. Now, does that mean that you don't have people go astray? Sure, it'll happen. It happens in everything to a level. Hopefully, not a ridiculous level, right? And if the organization is that blatant, why are you still there? Get out, run. And but to project onto organizational culture to amplify that it is worse than it has ever been is not true. It's also not fair to take the personal wanderings of the life's purpose, right? So on your journey of life, you may be trying to establish. There's some folks who know exactly what they want to do. They graduate from high school or their trade school, and they go right to their next level, and they know exactly what it is. I'm an artisan and I do art. I'm an engineer and I engineer things, mechanical or otherwise. You may know exactly the track that you're on. And for those folks, it's pretty straightforward. But for folks who are trying to collect because perhaps they have multiple talents and multiple gifts, and they're trying to find ways to maximize those, not only for themselves, but also for the benefit of the broader culture, then that's a and I say wandering, but I say it with great respect. That wandering to figure out your purpose is an important aspect of life, and to work in a particular organization while you figure it out is absolutely fine. But what is not fair is to take any generational traumas, codependencies, all these other things, and then project that the source of the reason why that you ended up in those situations, or that you didn't overcome them, or XYZ, is because of the organization. That's not really fair to the organization. They may have just triggered you because they acted the way, say, people who are generations past in your family or whatever, or distant, however it may reflect for your own life. They may have just that situation was just triggered by the organization. Why is that? Well, it turns out that the leadership, maybe mirrored how your parents were, or mirrored how a certain person in your life who betrayed your family or betrayed your, relationship, or your whatever, your friend group, however it reflects, or just you in general. Somebody disrespected and spoke down to you, and you felt, made you feel bad, right? And so somebody's tone created that environment in the organization that you're working in, right? So that triggered it, and perhaps that tone was, inappropriate, and perhaps that tone was fine, but because it measured against and triggered something that you had occur in your past, isn't the fault of the organization, right? That just is an opportunity now for you to go, why did that bother me? Why did I feel that way? It's one thing to say, oh, somebody made me feel that way, to look externally, and I got to blame the trees because of, whatever, because I got to walk through the forest. No. Those triggering events are valuable in a lot of ways, because as you go into the we call it the five whys. When you go into the five whys and you get down to the core of why something made you feel a certain way, then you can start to heal yourself up from the core issue that you get to, right? If your parents were shopping in the grocery, this happened to me once. I'm using this as an example. My mom got to shopping, and I think I wandered down the toy aisle or something, as a little kid. And and didn't know that she was, not nearby, obviously. You're a kid, you don't care. You're just doing what kids do. And she probably thought I was right behind her, which is probably where where I was before I veered off to go to the toy aisle. Something like that. I don't remember the exact scenario. But some people go through those situations and they may feel abandonment, right? I'll tell you the funny thing about what happened to me is mom wasn't around and I wasn't lost. I went up to this is a kidism, right? I go up to the front and I told the cashier or whatever, I said, I think my mother's lost. So they announced over the PA. Yeah. Anyway, and they thought that was just so funny, and I vaguely remembered it at all, to be honest with you, but because it did occur and other people remembered it, I was reminded more of it later. So yeah. So, but some people, quite honestly, and I use that lightheartedly is because it was funny. But some people feel abandoned. Maybe the parent didn't come pick them up after a practice, or they didn't, whatever. All these things, those little micro abandonment things where somebody's neglected you in some way, and worse. There are so many worse things, right? But in organizations, if somebody's tone and the way that they are start to mirror that same tone that that you experienced some other aspect of your life completely unrelated, now you're what? Now you're projecting and overlaying onto to this. It could be the people you work for or people you work with. Now you're projecting that onto them, and you're saying, well, you're triggering me, or you may not even know you're being triggered. You may just feel offended. But in reality, somebody may have been, just passionate about what they were doing, and you interpreted it differently. So we have to be careful there, right? We have to be careful to filter out, and this is why follow-up and communication is so important, because in reciprocating and being fair in an organizational environment, it's absolutely fair to follow up with what did you mean by that? When you said that thing, it sounded like you were, you were kind of coming across a little bit rude. Give a person a chance to go, well, I'm completely sorry. I was kind of in a hurry because the customer, this and that. Because people do make mistakes. People do fall into ruts and self-awareness. You may just be bringing to light to somebody else that they kind of were not self-aware. They were unaware of themselves. And when you do that, you may be helping them out. So your triggering could reflect a communication that helps to resolve a thing. And next thing you know, you may be bonded as best friends forever after that. Why is that? Because you found common ground. And from that common ground, you can build, consensus. You can grow friendships and so on. So the fairness needs to be in the follow-up. There is fairness and reciprocation in the follow-up. But there's also fairness and reciprocation in understanding, if you're organizational leaders, that your organization is reflected as an individual. And if that individual is disrespecting other people, triggering them because they just don't care, well, that's also wrong. And when you're called on it, you got to be prepared to own it. Because if you're brave enough to run an organization, if you're brave enough to step out and want to lead people, darn well be better prepared and willing to humbly accept critical feedback. Why is that? If I'm your customer, you're providing me a product that is not up to snuff, and I'm going to tell you that, and I'm going to say this is how it affected my business because your product or what I used to build my product with, and you can't handle the fire of me going, this product didn't live up to what it was supposed to do, and you go back and start pointing fingers at your organization and your team and the members of your team when you made critical errors in your decision points, right? You're the one that set up the operations plan. You see, I can pick this apart all day. This is a carcass that lays there that you can see every bone sticking out of. This is where reciprocation is not alive. Organizations that pass the buck from their team to the customer and back and forth, obfuscating responsibility to the team instead of owning it at the decision point. So if you're not willing to own the decision and the why of the decision, right, that causes quality products to go out your door, or service as well, then you're doing a disservice. You're doing a disservice not only to your customers, but you're also doing a disservice and representing your team in an improper way, in a very unfair way, and even worse so if you're blaming your team for things that you have complete control over. If you were essentially the driver of a rudderless ship, and you're just going, showing up, just checking in and checking out every day, and you're not owning your organization 360 degrees, and you have quality issues, and you have service issues, and you have communication issues, and you have tonal issues in your organization, then your organization is a mess and it needs to be cleaned up. You better get to hopping. And the reason why is your team members are leaving in droves probably. And why is that? They're leaving because they can easily see that there isn't a fairness, there isn't a reciprocation between your organization and the customer, between your organization and the team. And then conversely, team members, if you're not stepping up to the plate and remembering that your organization is not responsible for your emotional development, right? It's fine to be able to ferret out some of these things so that misunderstandings are cleared up, but don't expect your organization to be your psychologist or your pastor or priest. They are not. They are there to serve the customer. And when you are there to help them to do that. And the fairness and the reciprocation is that they provide you the adequate compensation for doing so. And if they are not, communicate that to them. And if your performance isn't to a level that fairness is maintained, then you need to step up your game. So there's plenty of room for stepping up the game all the way around. And so folks need to own their part, and they need to bring it every day. And because you're people who are showing up on your team to participate in your organization, they're representing their families, their friends, their communities. Not unlike when we played sports in school or activities or anything, represented a community in any way, shape, or form. You're representing the people that are in your groups, your civic groups, your religious organizations, all these things. You're representative of those even when you show up to work. So what person are you bringing to work? Are you bringing, your your most evolved self that contributes and is part of a team that really wants to get after it and perform well? Because if you're part of that hungry team, then you're probably not only wanting success, but you are finding it. And you're looking for opportunities to improve, right? And if you're not looking for those. You're just kind of wanting to quietly show up and quietly leave every day and hope nobody notices that you don't really care. And that's who you don't want to be. You want to be the person who steps up, who cares. And in doing so, this is how we protect love in our culture, right? When we do these things, we're protecting love. So just wanted to talk to you a little bit today about organizational reciprocation between not only just the organization and leadership, but also the team members, and then also how that relates to customers. All right, folks, have a great day today. Remember, hit that good domino 3 to 5 times a day to uplift, inspire, motivate, and just encourage folks, help them out. And when you do that, not only you're transforming culture, but you're transforming yourself, and that's an excellent thing, right? That makes everything great. Take care, hit like, share, and subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time.